All right. Got a lot of thumbs up. Thank you, everybody, for coming to tonight's session. It is just 6 o'clock. I'm Jeremy Crones, Director of Colorado Headwaters Land Trust, and we'll do some brief introductions. First, some housekeeping. This is our second panel of Hats Off for Headwaters, which is Colorado Headwaters Land Trust's 25th anniversary event, fundraising and education. Tonight's panel is landowners. We have 3 landowners, which Riley Bear, who's our MC for the event, will introduce in a second. This panel is being recorded, and to that end, everybody is muted except for Riley, myself, and the 3 panelists. If you do have questions, you are free to type them into the chat. I don't see that anybody is on a phone, so that should resolve some of those issues. And my last word is be sure to bid on some items and donate, and Riley will talk about that a little bit more right now. Go ahead, Riley.
Hello, everybody. In case you weren't here for Sunday's panel, I'm Riley Bear, and I will be your MC this evening and the rest of the week, and I'm so thrilled to be here. Quickly, I would love to talk about handbid and the auction items that we have. So you can log on to handbid.com, that's handbid.com, or you can use the handbid app, which I am pulling up right here, and you can check out the awesome items that they have to offer. They have, alcohol baskets. They have, custom-made items. They have wonderful gift certificates. I mean, Christmas is right around the corner, so start bidding on those items so that you don't have to worry about it later on. And then also in the app, one thing that's super neat is you can check out the items that have no bids. I'm sorry if you can't really see it here, but there's wonderful artwork in here that hasn't been bid on yet. So get in there and start bidding. They have signed books. They have all these gift certificates. So get in there and start bidding. They also are doing a paddle raise. So typically at a live auction during a paddle raise, you have a bid card, you'll raise it real high at a donation level that is meaningful and impactful to you. But this year we're doing things a little bit differently. We're doing virtual, so we have to pivot a little bit. So they have donation levels ranging from $5,000 to $25. So, there's really a lot of options that can cater to you. And what's so wonderful about this app is that they also allow you to donate at a customary level. So my goal is for participation. I would love for everybody to participate and donate at a level that is meaningful to them, because donating is contagious. If your generosity is going to move people to donate, and we really want to keep this special place special. So please, please give. I am so excited and thrilled to introduce our landowners. So first I have Beverly Parsons. She bought property with her husband in 1995. 10 years later, they sold their home with just a few acres and put the remaining 36 acres in a conservation easement. Beverly, if there's anything that you'd like to add or say hello, please feel free.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back in Grand Lake, even if it's by Zoom.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you here. Next, we have Merrit Linke. He currently lives just south of Granby in a home that has been in his family for 5 generations. It's known as the Linke Ranch. When I read that, I was floored. That is so amazing and so neat and rare. So I was so impressed by that. Merrit and some of his siblings put individual holdings into a conservation easement, and they are actually considering using this tool again with the Headwaters Foundation. So please, Merrit, say hello or add anything that you would like to add.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being on there. We do say the E on our name, so we say Linke.
Oh, Linke, I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
No worries.
I'll be sure to get it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And last, but certainly not least, we have Chris Sammons joining us. She is a 4th-generation Kremling rancher who, along with her family, raised cattle in the historic McElroy Ranch. The Colorado Headwaters and the Easement have been a great option for her and her siblings. The gates are always open. She wants people to know that the gates are always open, so come and visit her ranch. Chris?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Zooming. Wish we were in person. I'm much better in person, but this will do. And I'm really looking forward to answering any questions that anybody has, helping you out. And I'm with 100% sincerity say the gates are always open at the historic McElroy Ranch for anyone that wants to come down and see up close the benefits that we've gotten from this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before I dive into questions, again, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any personal questions or comments that you would like to add, feel free to put it in the chat box and I will read those aloud, and our panelists can, give their feedback and answer any questions that you have. Awesome. So I'll move to my first question. Why did you initially decide to pursue a conservation easement on your property?
Who's
Sure, I'll
supposed
go
to
first.
I can take a stab at it. And I think I said in my introduction, the bio kind of thing, we used it probably for two main purposes, but one was an estate planning tool in terms of kind of a tax incentive and get some of the assets out of mom and dad's hands so that we could do a transfer without taking a big hit to the IRS for the next generation. And the secondary reason was we wanted to see the ranch preserved for the conservation values and to see it stay as ranch land that we had worked so hard, and generations before us, I'm sure, even worked harder than we ever have to keep it a ranch and keep everything going. So those are really the two main reasons.
Go ahead, Beverly.
Okay, well, our situation was that we bought the property in Grand Lake in 1995, and it was just kind of somewhat of a spur of the moment thought. We were looking for just vacant land, and because we were living in Fort Collins at the time, and we just at the end of the day that we were looking at things, the realtor said, well, maybe you'd like to see this property. And it turned out to be some house that had 38 acres. It had a house, and the owner said, well, there might be some possibility of subdividing the property. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, we just decided to buy it. So we were living in Grand Lake and always somewhere else at the same time. Like we were partly in California, partly in Washington, partly in Fort Collins. And I was traveling so much for work because I work nationally and somewhat internationally. So it was just kind of a back and forth. And so the Grand Lake property always felt like home, and it felt like the place where we really belonged and connected. And as we went along trying to decide, when we decided to move to Washington State in 2004, it was at that point that I'd been working for many years to try and subdivide this property. So it was at that point that I found out about conservation easements, and we had the choice of getting several building sites on that property that we were going to separate out from the house. And I thought, wait a minute, why do I want to accumulate any more money when the more important thing is to protect nature and to accumulate the well-being of the planet in this little space that we have? And our property overlooks Grand Lake. If you've been to Grand Lake Lodge, it's kind of the similar view, and it backs up against the national park. So I thought, I got to explore that. So that's when we started moving in that direction. And it was actually after I'd already moved to Washington that we were working on that.
Well, our story is eerily similar to Merritt's. Family, land rich and cash poor, which is kind of the story of the West. And big families. I have siblings, and I'm the one that wants to stay on the ranch. And I also have the kid that wants to stay on the ranch for the next generation. So what are you going to do when, in our case, my dad passed away suddenly? And they thought, my mom and dad thought they had done estate planning, and bless them, they had up to a certain point. But when you're staring at a multi-million-dollar possible tax bill and a bunch of other things, and maybe a huge family fight. The conservation easement was very obvious to us that was definitely our first step, because like Merrit, none of the siblings, even though they didn't want to stay on the ranch and chase cattle, they certainly didn't want to see it subdivided. They really didn't want to see it sold. We have beautiful virgin Colorado River and Muddy Creek running through our property. We never wanted to see any of that do anything but be conserved and used to the betterment of the community and the family. And the easement fell right up our alley. So we never looked back as a family, remaining the 4 kids and our mom. We never looked back. We looked straight forward and got it done.
Awesome. Well, my next question for you is, what kinds of issues did you encounter when granting your easement? If you wouldn't mind, Beverly, would you go first?
Sure. Well, I must say that it was extremely smooth. I had taken a lot of time for me to get things worked through the county just to subdivide our property. That had been the biggest struggle that I had. And when it came to the conservation easement, when I talked to the people at the land trust, they were so knowledgeable and helpful. I just went one step to another, and it just flowed extremely smoothly.
Very nice. Chris, would you mind going next?
Actually, we were one of the largest early easements for Headwaters. And of course, there were hiccups, there were bumps, there were learning curves, but it wasn't anything that we felt like was going to be an obstacle. We would not proceed with the easement. And we had also received advice from other ranchers in the valley and whatnot, that why didn't you go with the Cattlemen's Land Trust and that kind of deal. But the group of people that ended up helping us the most on ours, and we, the land trust, and we asked for help across the state. Once we discovered that everybody was pulling from the same pool of money, in our case of our easement, which was a bargain sale, so we were looking for cash. We just got in line, fell in place, and figured this would be it was my, I don't want to really call it a gift, but more of, I felt like it was my obligation as a community member to help the land trust through the growing pains while they helped us through the growing pains, because I could see that it was a very valuable resource that this county truly needed. And what better than to have the people that are closest to your easement and to your community and to your family be the ones that you keep close for big deals like this. And we are thrilled. We never looked back. Like I said, we're thrilled, and we welcome every new member to the board, and welcome Jeremy. The people have come and gone, and we're just happy to have everybody in this community still be so supportive of the land trust.
Wonderful. Merrit?
Okay, so we didn't probably have quite the same experience that either of the other two had. We did this early on, and it was called Middle Park Land Trust at that time, 2006, 2007, kind of in that time frame. And there was certainly some different criteria in place then than there is now, for sure. I will say that the Middle Park Land Trust was very helpful, and I think that's one of the reasons why we chose to go with the local people, so that we had an easy access to go and talk to people about how to do it. But it's not an easy process. I think we spent almost a year going through it and showing the appraisers the values and what was going on and where the property lines were and where the creeks were and where the ditches were and all those things. And they took tons and tons of pictures and came back for several visits. So it was not an easy process. And then then you write up the easement document itself, which says what you can agree to do, or basically you're selling the development rights. And you write that up yourself so that it's how you want it to be and how you want the ranch to be preserved, and then that's what you agree to do. So it was certainly not an easy process for us, and some of even within our own family, we didn't have quite the same situation. Both mom and dad are still alive at that time. They still are now, and there's 6 kids. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and there was not unanimous support to even go the conservation easement route. So 3 of us did and 3 of us didn't. And we did it with individual property that was in our own names and kind of did it individually. But overall, with the 3 that did the conservation easements, we preserved 600 acres in conservation easement. So that's kind of our story, a little different.
That's amazing. So my
Can
third
I just
question
add
for
to that
you-
a little bit, please? That I'm sorry to butt in, but yeah, I agree with Merritt that it's not an easy process. You have to participate as the landowner 100%, and there are tough decisions to make and tough calls, and you kind of need to keep some patience and your wits about you. But and if you try to collaborate with other family members and what, it can get touchy and goey, but because it's a document that you are creating. It's not something that happens to you. It's something that you, the landowner, creates. So you get out of it what you put in it.
Thank you so much for adding on to that. So my third question for you is, why did you choose to work with the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust? And Chris, I'd love if you would start.
Well, I kind of covered that already in that I was passionate about keeping it as local as we could, because I knew as the sibling that lived on the land, on the ground, in the land, in the community, that I was going to do the bulk of the work, because my other siblings scattered to the 7 winds. My mom had no desire to participate in any of it, and I just couldn't imagine having to try to do this with people that didn't have any idea where the Colorado River was, anything about our community, that kind of a thing. And the fact that we were within 30 miles of the office was certainly, as Merritt says, there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of picture taking, a lot of walking the ground, a lot of aerial video from the early days, and where did the ditches go, and that kind of stuff. And it would have been really way more complicated if we were dealing with somebody that was only coming through the county, once a month, that kind of a thing. So we just felt like it would be an asset to our local community to have it held locally.
Very nice. Merritt, would you answer the question next?
Yeah, and I kind of covered this also, and same thing that Chris talked about. I think that local resource was really helpful for us, because we did have a lot of questions and a lot of, I guess, support from them at that time. And I think another one was we had a little bit of a personal connection with the executive director of the land trust at that time. I'd known him from other, I guess, things outside that business, and I knew that he kind of understood the agricultural, I guess, conditions and criteria factors that would go into putting a big decision like this into something for perpetuity. And there's a big difference between an agricultural based conservation easement and open space. Those are 2 entirely different things. And I think he understood that. And that's one of the big reasons why we went locally.
Awesome. Beverly?
So I also agree with what Chris and Meredith said about it being local. And for me, obviously my piece of property, we're just a little piece compared to what Chris and Meredith are dealing with. But I think the main reason I did was because I had been working with the county for practically 10 years trying to get that land subdivided, and there were so many issues. And all the things that Chris and Merritt have talked about in terms of working through things, I had actually done and had it all ready by the time it came to the conservation easement. And because of that work with the county for so long. And then the person who was at the land trust at that point, I had gotten to know already because she had worked at the county previously. And so I had always felt real comfortable with her. And so it was, and just like what they said too, just wanting to keep it local and people who understood what was going on there.
Wonderful. Do you have any reflections on your easement all these years later? Merritt, would you start us off?
That's a really good question. And I see that my friend Jody Barbour's on the phone, and she can attest to some of the trials and tribulations we had when the state came back and denied our credits. And they basically sent us a letter. by the way, you owe us $176,000. You have denied your easement. And that was not a fun letter to get. So that's a whole nother story. I probably would have done a couple things a little different with looking back now. I might have put a building envelope in a different place, or maybe changed the size of it to leave a little bit more options open. But that's probably it. I don't have any qualms at all about the process and actually putting it into a conservation easement. I still agree that it was the right thing to do. And I still, like I said earlier, even when we went through all that hell with the state, we're still willing to do another round of it if that becomes an opportunity for us in terms of the family. So even with all that, yeah, we would still probably do it again. We're smarter now, though.
Chris, would you answer next, please?
Yeah, hi, Jody. We could not have done our easement without the excellent help of and I'm not going to start mentioning names, mostly because I've forgotten some of them, but I don't want to leave anybody out. But we met some excellent, wonderful people along the way. And of course, there's things that we wish we would have done different. I think in our case that we probably left too many building envelopes for the size of our easement, but you can't see the future. So, and we certainly had a strong learning curve with the executive director at the time, who had more of a conservation mind than an agricultural mind. So there was a very large learning curve on both of our parts. I mean, we learned from each other what is valuable to the people that are paying us for our easement, what they want to get, and also it was a chance for us as true agricultural on the ground producers, day-to-day cattle ranchers, to offer insight into other people that may not ever had a chance to understand why do I need a water gap, or why can't we use a windmill for this, or what is the value of this ditch being in this place, or why can't we move a fence over there, or why doesn't this building envelope work, that kind of a deal. And that just goes back to you get out of your easement what you, the landowner, puts in, that the document that you come up with is the document that you come up with. And if you don't like it at the end, maybe you should have started over sooner. So, but yes, the people that helped us along the way, wow, great people.
Wonderful. Beverly?
So we did our conservation easement in 2007, so it's been 13 years now. And when I think back on it, I'm just so glad that we did it. We did it in such a way that property has one building site on it, and so it's pretty much close to the edge and overlooking the lake there. And we had intended to actually build there at some point, but then we have moved and we no longer have any plans to do that. And I think as I was reflecting on this, I thought, I think the main thing for me at this point is that to be able to sell that property to somebody who cares as much about the conservation easement as we do. That it's not, oh, well, I have to put up with this easement, but no, they really are glad that there's just the one building site, and that the easement is something that they share that commitment to protecting the land.
Wonderful. Well, we have a few comments in our comment box. Jody says hello to Merrit and Chris. And we also had Nina comment, thanks to you three for the wonderful comments and input. It is not a simple process. You are our most important ambassadors to the conservation community, and our easements are one of Grand County's best assets. Yep. And Katie just wrote, thank you all for protecting our land. Awesome. Very nice feedback. I am actually a realtor in Iowa. And so, you see a lot of new developments popping up. I take buyers through all these houses that look so similar. So when I was reading your bios, I found it very, very refreshing and very interesting that Merrit, you're a 5th generation, living in the Linke Ranch. I just thought that was so neat. And, Chris, you're a 4th generation rancher. And I found that so, so cool that you guys were doing that, because, in Iowa, I see, farmland, getting destroyed and sold and turned into these developments of houses that all look the same. So I found it very refreshing to read your bios.
If you don't mind, I'd like to share a comment. And this wasn't the only comment that I received after notice of our easement was published locally. I had complete strangers come up to me, and because our pictures were published too, in the grocery store and post office, and lots of local people too, to thank us for doing that. And the comments were, it touched my heart, because they said, I grew up in the city, or I lived in town, and I know I will never have an opportunity to own a ranch or a big piece of property or any of beautiful Colorado. And I want to thank you for making sure that I'm always going to be able to look out my car window or walk along the edge of town or whatever and see this beautiful ranch remain exactly like it is forever. And so are my kids and their kids. And they were thankful. And, when you're day to day, you're going by, you're doing your thing, you're making your living, and sure, you appreciate the beauty and the gifts that the Creator has given us here, but sometimes you just kind of need to have that brought up again a little bit about what's really important here. And it was really, really a blessing to be able to hear the feedback from the community and to know that we've done the right thing.
So can I follow up on Chris's comment?
Yeah, of course.
I really appreciate what Chris and the Salmons family did, because they did this post-trauma in terms of the conservation easement program just nearly died off because of all of the experiences that people like we had when the state was going back on these easements because of some bad actors that were really abusing this and abusing the tax credit system. And Chris was kind of the first one locally in kind of the modern era that was willing to take that risk and do it, because there's a lot more hoops to jump through now than there was when we did it back in 6 and 7. And there was no one knocking down the door at the Headwaters Land Trust to put lands into easement. So I really think that Chris and her family took a big step there to do that. And I'd love to put Jody Barbour on the spot here to ask for her to do a few comments about kind of that whole process too, from her perspective. So if you could talk, Jody, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, Merrit. Hi, Chris. Hi, everybody. How is everybody doing? Great to see you. Sorry, I'm not showing my face. I'm sitting in a car at the moment, so not so easy. Yeah, to Merritt's point, there were a lot of issues with the Department of Revenue prior to the program that we have in place now that Merrit and his family went through, and I think for the most part worked out to the best situation that it can be. But because of those things that Merrit and his family experienced, we now have the Division of Conservation that formally approves tax credits before they're issued. And Chris and her family went through that process as well. And it was right when the program was under the Division of Real Estate. So the approval process is now under the Division of Conservation under Department of Regulatory Agencies. But Chris and her family went through it when it was with the Division of Real Estate. And there were a lot of challenges there. And Chris, I know, can speak to those. And it was a very, very rough process once they had already finally closed on their conservation easement. And when to get their tax credit certificate, I helped them through the application process. And it was an absolute nightmare. The good thing is what was learned out of that process and a few others, there needed to be a firewall put in place, because at the time the Division of Real Estate was approving or certifying appraisers as certified general appraisers to do the appraisals for these conservation easements. They were also reviewing and approving applications for tax credit certificates, and they started attacking the appraisers and in turn kind of attacking I know that's a hard word, but that's kind of how it felt attacking the landowners at the same time. So in 2018, the Division of Conservation was created, which is under DORA, but it put that firewall between the Division of Real Estate, so they didn't have their eyes and authority over every aspect, you know, the appraisers and the approving the conservation purposes and the conservation easements, and then approving the appraisals for the tax credit certificates. So I have to commend both Merrit and Chris for sticking through it, and it's wonderful because it is a great thing when it works, and it's so important to pay attention to those details and really go for what you want in the easement, and really, you know, make it work for your family.
Thank you so
Jody.
much, Jody.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Steve Fitzgerald had mentioned having a question when the time is right. I feel like the time's right, so if you want to ask.
Thanks, Riley.
Yeah,
thank you, Riley, and apologies to those of you who've been noticing Diana and I cooking dinner, but we're fitting this in before I have a call with Hong Kong later tonight. So Beverly, you mentioned international work, you can appreciate that. One of the things that I was ruminating on, particularly as Merrit and Chris and Beverly were talking about the challenges of getting these things done, is that we have struggled in some of our conversations about how we better appeal as a board and as an organization to ranchers, to the agriculture region, and help them appreciate the fact that they have a lot of say in the way in which a easement is structured. And one of the things that really struck me is how each of you have articulated how bespoke in some ways your solution was. Any suggestions that you would have for the organization for how we can better communicate that point to people?
This is Merritt. I can take that to start off with. I know Chris would have a comment on this one probably also, probably Beverly does too, but I think you really hit on an important point there, is that I think that a lot of landowners that are reluctant to go this route don't understand it completely. And they think that you're selling the ranch. And you're not. You're still able to do what you have been doing historically for 4 or 5 generations for a long time. You're able to do those things that you do. It's just that you're protecting it, and you can help generate some like Chris said, this land rich cash poor kind of thing, help to offset that and put some money back into some infrastructure and make it a little more viable so that you can continue to run the operation. And I think it's important to note that the operation of ranching is different than owning the land. So it's like owning a factory, but there's no machinery in it, kind of thing, if you don't operate it and run it correctly and profitably. So I think that's how that maybe that messaging can get out there. There is some financial aspects. Yes, it's a lot less than it would be if you just sold it to the next golf course developer, whatever. But there is some financial aspects that you can put back into what you love to do, what you want to keep your family doing. But I think that message is that you write that up how you want it to look, and what you're willing to give up and what you're willing to continue to do is important, and how that it can benefit the family and the family operation in particular, and then preserve it for those conservation values and those agricultural values for the future. So that might be something that Jeremy can help and the board can help to take into consideration. Thanks for the question.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, we've talked about this before, you and I, and at the board too, that
Yep.
I think maybe a good place to start with the ranching community is to say, I kind of don't think that any rancher of my dad's generation, or even I'm old now too, my generation, has in the back of my mind, gee, I can't wait to sell the ranch and watch it be developed. Can't wait for those, 4-acre or 2-acre home sites to come in here with the golf course. Gee, if only I could just facilitate selling this ranch and getting it developed. So I think that the confusion comes in that a lot of people conflate conservation and easement with public access and loss of use for any owner, or particularly the word public comes up a lot. That am I going to have to open up my land for the public to come fish, or what does that really mean? And so I think the place to start, at least locally here, is that, or for any conservation easement, is to say that you, the landowner, are in control of the destiny of your land. If you don't care what happens to it after you sell it, well, certainly call Riley. She'll be able to help you out with that. But if you are concerned that you don't want to see any development on it, this is certainly the option, and it's a great estate tool when you can't quite decide, because it buys you some time, and it gives you some options.
Good thoughts. Thank you both.
I would just add a couple of comments to that, and I'm as you're talking, I'm thinking I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and there we have a family situation there too, where I think we can get to conservation easement there, and also I'm dealing with environmental coalition here in Washington that I'm a part of, and we're trying to build ways to conserve the land. And it's I've just learned, I learned so much from doing the conservation easement as I'm doing these things now. But to your point is, one of the things that I think is happening is that more and more young people are really recognizing the importance of protecting the land. And I'm wondering about the possibility of getting some kind of a class or an event for high school kids and younger even, to help them realize how important it is to protect the land. And then it works so well to use young people as the messengers to older people. And the other thing is that I think what happens is you just go from one day to the next, and you never quite get around to doing it. And so if there's some way to like have a focused attention on it, where people are able to talk with one another, and just instead of hearing speakers, but just talk, what are you doing? What are you thinking about doing? And get some real momentum from a group of people who can do it. And there's so many of you great people on the board and involved that just having little coffee clutches at your houses or out in the backyard now in COVID days, but somewhere, I think just spreading the word could be a really valuable thing.
Good. Thank you all.
And, I might add too that I tend to look at it from the larger end, larger properties and convoluted families and that kind of a deal. But, Beverly is exactly right, that any piece of property is ripe for conservation. It doesn't matter how big it is. And if that is if that is how you feel, you don't want, if that's what you want to do, by all means, certainly step forward. And it is an option. You can conserve and save your property, even if it's just a tiny piece. That you don't have to save the whole west end of the county. If one piece at a time is how it goes.
Thank you so much for your question, Steve. That was great. And I want to mention this for Jody. The program is running and working smoothly under the Division of Conservation. So very happy to hear that. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to write them in the chat. Is there anything that you panelists would like to add to this conversation?
I just wanted to add one little thing. It's when Chris mentioned about smaller pieces of property, it'd be kind of interesting to look at a Google map and find the boundaries of people's properties that all may be pretty small, but they butt up against each other, where a group of people could collectively, neighbors could decide to put some, something in a conservation in a way that would protect a piece of property that's bigger than what they individually have. I don't know if that's possible, but it's possibility maybe.
This is Jeremy Crones. I do have a question, and some of you have, or of the three of you have touched this so far, but I'm curious to know, how do you think the management of your property would be different if you didn't have the easement? And I understand that the threats of sale were always there, you know, fracturing because of families, but you as landowners without the easement versus with the easement all these years later.
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. So let me take a stab at it. So you're asking if the management of the land with an easement versus land management of the land without the easement would be different? Well, I think from our perspective, it's not any different. I think that the way that we wrote up our easement is because we wanted to continue to be able to do what we're doing, is to graze cows and put hay and do all those things and irrigate the land and run the ditches and all those things that we typically were doing already. And it's just, that's how we wrote up the easement document. So I don't think that the management of the land is really any different with or without the easement from an agricultural perspective. So that's how I would answer that question.
And I think I'm going to say kind of the same thing Merrit did, that we were very conscious when we wrote that up to make sure that nothing was going to prohibit the ability to keep cows and grow hay and that kind of stuff. And we're conscious, of course, Dave and I and my son Cole, who are on the land every day, that we are under a conservation easement. So like when the big wind picked up this spring and ripped half of the tin or the roofing off of one of our loafing sheds down below the house, it's very visible. We have to be careful when we go to replace it, that it's going to be something that matches the restrictions that we ourselves put on ourselves for our conservation easement. We can't just run down there and slapshod some old tin that I salvaged off of a bright purple roof over behind the school building or whatever, which is the habit of poor ranchers, is to scrounge and make do. So, I mean, but that's not something that we can't survive without, or makes it impossible to do what we're doing.
I have one follow-up comment too on that, and again, that's probably where Chris did theirs a little different, because we didn't put any land that had any improvements on into conservation. It was all just pasture land, range land, and forested land. And one of the things that we wrote up in one of the easements is the ability to cut trees to harvest timber, because that was a historical thing that we did on this ranch, and it is part of the management. We made some of the income to keep going in some of those years from logging that we did ourselves. And I think it is important to recognize that forest management is an important tool to keep the landscapes healthy. So it was in those easement documents that logging was allowed on this particular piece. Again, it's important to write that up, how that it works for you, and then that's your easement document that you're agreeing to. And just like Chris said, they agreed to put those restrictions in, and we agreed to allow these operations on that piece of land. And that going back to Steve's original question, I think that's an important marketing tool when you pitch this to other people. You write that easement document up how you want it to look and what things you're willing to give up, and certainly it affects your before and after value in terms of what that appraisal looks like, is what things you're allowing, what things you're not. But that is, again, that's up to you to decide that. So it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, Merrit, I've become convinced that, to underscore your point, that is a real opportunity for us, is we've got to get that point across and help people be thoughtful about their future possibilities.
So along those lines, Steve, and thanks for bringing this up too, and Merrit, that just there's a difference in land values, not much, but a difference in land values between east end and the west end of this county. And Beverly and Merrit, do you think that you know, when years ago, the thought of putting a conservation easement, that's just going to destroy the value of the remainder of the ranch. Nobody will ever buy any property with a conservation easement on it. And then about the time we started working on ours, we were hearing around the edges a lot of realtors and people in the know saying, you know, this might actually enhance the value of your property. And so I would like to steer the conversation in that direction and ask anybody, even the people that have logged in, what do they think? How does that affect the overall value of your property to have an easement on it? Is it going to turn out to actually be, you know, we sold our easement to get some of the value out of the estate, and all of a sudden, then 10 years later, that comes back to bite us. That the value's right back up where it used to be, even with the easement on it. Thoughts?
Well, I'm going to sort of agree with you, and I think there is a difference between the east end and the west end of the county. I think in our location, I think that if there was, I mean, if it was all into a conservation easement, it's certainly different than how it is now, where there's just, you know, parts, because we're surrounded by development, 40-acre pieces and 10-acre subdivisions and all that. I'm in between 2 golf courses and, you know, all those things. And I think it would be different. I do think that the conservation easement reduces it somewhat, but I don't think it reduces to the point where it's not certainly a marketable piece of property at all. And sometimes it enhances parts of the properties nearby. So I think there's some different factors that apply depending on where you're at. So
I'll just make one quick comment, and I think Stuart wants to say something. I would just say that I think in our case, that it has not diminished the value of the property. I think people appreciate the fact that there's so much open space there.
Jody wanted to add that the key when needing to make changes or repairs to structures is that those changes don't harm the conservation purposes.
I just wanted to say I own one of the parcels along the Fraser River and the Fraser Flats that goes out to the highway, and me and my neighbors, I think that having a conservation easement would actually increase the value of our properties. You really can't do anything out on the pasture anyway, and the folks that are looking to own this kind of land, like we were, are attracted by having the open land rather than having something that could be developed into 35-acre parcels or something like that.
I did want to add, there's a little bit of a lull here. I did want to add that there is 10 items in the hand bid app or online that do not have any bids. So for anyone watching, again, Christmas is right around the corner. Get those bids in. And I did want to add, this is the 25th anniversary of Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. And I think it would be so amazing if everyone could give $25. That's like 5 trips to Starbucks. So, I mean, if you can give that up and give it to the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust, that would be amazing because, you know, they're doing a wonderful thing by conserving and protecting this land. If you have any more questions or comment for these landowners or the land trust, please email info@coloradoheadwaterslandtrust.org. Again, that is info@coloradoheadwaterslandtrust.org. And we also have a comment from Jerry Pierce. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you all so much. And I can't agree more. This was very, very informative. These last 2 panels both have been very informative for, you know, I think I speak for everybody, for myself and us all. You guys are doing a wonderful thing. And I'm so thrilled to be a part of this and to learn and to listen to you all speak about something that is so important and truly isn't talked about enough. So thank you all so much for being here. I think we can draw this to a close. If you have any last comments that you'd like to add, please feel free. We're happy to listen to them and hear them.
Well, thank you for being the MC tonight, and thanks, Jeremy, for kind of putting this all together. So appreciate what you do.
Likewise, thanks very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and welcome to come down and explore the McElroy Ranch. Jeremy just got to do that a couple days ago, and looking forward to next year when we can all mingle in person with adult beverages and groovy hors d'oeuvres.
Looking forward to it.
Great. Oh, sure, rub it in.